Get this out again. Great. Okay. So session 3. Really excited to get started here. I was able to read Fifi and Samantha's submissions for this class. They were really, really good. I really enjoyed them. I hope that you all had the opportunity to read them. Just as a show of hands, so I know what to expect. Did you all actually get a chance to read them?
Yeah, I read.
Go ahead and do chat box. That way I can sort of keep up. Okay. All right. I understand both Fifi and Samantha. It's one of those things where, like, when you're also up for workshop, it can sometimes be hard to keep up. So here's what we'll do. It's all right. Again, it often happens when you're yourself up for workshop. It'll be fine. When we get around to it, we'll go a little bit slowly. That way you can sort of have some time to catch up. But yeah, I thought that both submissions looked really good. They were good essays. I'm very excited to talk about them later on today. And I think we have some very specific things that we can discuss in terms of how we can make them better. But before we get to all of that, what I would like to do is I would like to pop open the couple of things that we were to read for today, because I think that they actually may be kind of helpful in terms of also thinking about how to take what you've got now and turn them into the next iteration that is a little bit further along. So with that being said, let's go on ahead and open up. I don't know why I'm saying let's. I can take care of it here. Yes. Okay. Please forgive all my documentary tabs. I've been watching a lot of documentaries lately. That seems to be what my life is of late. Okay. Here we are. I'm going to start over here. Okay. So there were 2 things that I wanted you guys to read for today. They were Chi, Portrait of My Father, and Eng, What Did My Mother, the Chemist, See in Betty Crocker. And let's start with Chi. And let's talk about what's going on here. Let's talk about how this works as a personal essay, what you like, what you don't like, what confuses you, and what stylistically would you consider stealing. I'd love to just open up the floor to your comments. So I'll try and get the audio stuff to actually be properly functioning. But yeah, I'd love to hear from you all. What did you think? What were your thoughts?
I didn't say that. I'm so on mute. I'm on mute.
What, Samantha?
Oh. I don't know. It's kind of confusing, but it was. I like.
What about it did you find confusing?
I guess perhaps it had to do with me reading it pretty quickly. It was linear and, well, actually it was quite linear, but not very directly streamlined.
Yeah. I really like the way that it's written, because I think that it's pretty spare and it has all these wonderful details that say a lot. And it cuts between time pretty effortlessly. But it's true, on a quick read, it can be a little bit disorienting because it goes by really fast and it keeps jumping. What were other thoughts? What did other people think as they were reading this?
Yeah, I like this detail. Seeing.
What were the details that spoke to you, Esther?
My favorite were like at the he's describing a jazz.
What was that describing her what?
It's like the last paragraph before the end.
There we are, yes. What in particular did you think was effective about that section of the writing?
I don't know. It was just really visual for me.
I agree. This is a very visual piece. And how it accomplishes that is something that's worth investigating, because we could all stand to be as good at those sorts of visual details as Chi is in this piece. What else is going on here that you don't like?
One thing I liked was the dialogue in the story. I thought it was a good jump from just the paragraphs and paragraphs of narration that speaks to you, and you can see what's going on. You know how the conversation happened and how it went down, and that's why.
I agree. I think usually when a piece gets to dialogue, it feels like it sort of is breaking and now it's doing dialogue. And here it sort of jumps straight in without giving you any indication. It just starts happening. I think it is really clean. It is really effortless. And for something to feel this effortless, that means that there was probably a lot of effort that went in. What else? What else is worthy of note in this piece? What would you consider stealing yourself?
Well, there was kind of a story, within even just a small phrase. They had for example, rice home on their backs. They're just these small phrases that kind of illuminate different small stories of life and kind of reveal his character a little bit. And
I agree wholeheartedly. One of the things that I would love to learn from Chi, from the author, is the way in which he gives those very small details that fill in a whole world. I think it's a particularly useful skill to learn for college essay writing, because in an application you have such a limited word count that one must figure out how to say a whole lot more with a whole lot less. And his model, I think, is a wise and effective model for learning that skill. There are a few things that I would like to talk about. If you all don't have any more things you'd like to share. Do you have any more that you'd like to bring up? Anything more you think is particularly effective in this piece?
Details from before, his mother telling him whatever he did not to marry blue-eyed blonde hair, and a blue-eyed blonde hair, blue-eyed, and then also the snow-hardened feet. He's calling back to.
Esther, thank you so much for bringing that up. That's, to point it out, it becomes oh, of course, right. But really good writing has those notes, those premonitions of the future, the little hints about what we're going to talk about in this class. Is an effective beginning makes a promise to you about how the piece is going to end. And in this essay that talks about his bare feet in the snow and talking about his family telling him not to marry a blue-eyed, blonde-haired American girl, when do you know the story is over? Well, when he marries a blue-eyed, blonde-haired American girl, or else when the relationship gets to the point where you know that that's what's to come. Thank you, Esther, for pointing that out. That's very well seen, well observed. We're going to be talking about that with all of your pieces, about how you can make promises like those that appear in this piece, that give your audience that subconscious thought of what they need to happen in order for them to be satisfied. Um, uh, one thing that I want to point out about this piece is it is doing a really interesting piece of work in terms with engaging and challenging the audience's expectations. I think it's particularly important in immigrant stories and stories of different racial identities to find the way of showing how one might be 1 foot in one world and 1 foot in another. I think there's something of a political act at play with the piece beginning like this. His drink was Crown Royal, his candy bar a Baby Ruth. Though he didn't like chocolate much, he was good at poker, loved reading Tolstoy, his suits were bespoke. You hear something like that, and you think at first, okay, maybe he's an American. No, maybe he's a Russian. And then at the very beginning of the second paragraph, you learn that he grew up in Korea and fought during the Korean War. And it sort of exists there to challenge the stereotypical white perspective that doesn't realize just how cultured and multi-ethnic the rest of the world can be, particularly Asian cultures, having little bits of stuff from everywhere. And I think that one of the biggest tricks of telling an ethnic story is engaging in this way that says, here are ways that I'm a part of my community. Here are ways that I'm a citizen of the world. I am not only defined by my skin color, my race, etc. That's really interesting to me. There's a principle that one of my directing teachers teaches. He likes to call it flip over all of the cards at the right times. Like as you're telling a story, you reveal this detail, and then you reveal this detail, and then you reveal this detail. And there's something quite profound about the fact that these first couple lines give you one image of this person in your head, and the beginning of the second paragraph is like, no, this is him. It's a political act. It's a clever one, and it challenges the audience to be more inviting and more inclusive. It's pretty cool. Yeah, that covers most of what I wanted to talk about here. And there's one other thing that I want to speak to. I often speak towards the beginning of these courses about something called indexing. Could someone just quickly define the word index for me? What do you think of when you hear the word index?
Can I guess?
Yeah, go for it.
Is it where you choose to make your paragraph start?
Yeah. So what I call indexing is what many other teachers of language arts would call topic sentencing, but I don't like that, and I'll sort of explain why. Because indexing is happening all over one's piece. It's like when you go to the back of the book, there's an index. There are all of these things that you can look for and find within the text. Well, at the beginning of a particular paragraph, you want to have something like an index. You want to guide your reader down the right pathway as opposed to the wrong one, right? And you want to do that in every stage of the process. You want to index the paragraph at the beginning of a paragraph in one sentence or three. So screw the topic sentence because it doesn't actually recognize the fact that indexes are of multiple lengths. You want to index a chapter with the opening paragraph, and you want to index a book with the opening chapter. This is what we're doing all the time. And we want to make sure that the things that we are introducing at the beginning, the ways in which we are framing the audience's opening experience, are making them read the piece right. There's a bit of really interesting indexing work that is happening in this piece. By those opening couple lines, we learn that he's an international man. He is Korean, but he is also a man of the world. We learn that his suits were bespoke, so he's kind of like a suave guy. His suits are specially made. And we know that the story will be over when he marries that blonde-eyed, blue-haired American girl. Did I just say blonde-eyed, blue-haired? Scratch that, reverse it. Anyway, there's a lot of work that happens at the beginning of a piece that orients the audience into how they should think about it. And we're going to be talking about that quite a bit, all of us, with the pieces that you all submitted today. And that's why I'm sort of sitting on this and thinking about it here. This piece, I think, does a really excellent job of indexing. It also does a really good job of introducing his character, because we can often take for granted that the people that we know and who we're closest to, that they're clear on the page, right? If I were writing about my dad, I would just be like, in a first draft, I would probably something like, that's when my dad did such and such thing. And I might miss and then revise on a subsequent draft some couple of details that give you an idea of who my dad is. Because my dad is a character to me, but he isn't yet a character to you. So with that being said, any final notes that you all would like to think about with respect to this piece, or shall we move on to the next one? Okay, all right. Well then, let's talk a little bit about the other piece for today, about Betty Crocker. What did you all notice about this piece? What works for you? What doesn't work for you? What confuses you? And what would you consider stylistically stealing? The floor is open. Would love to hear.
Like she one where she starts with like describing the Betty Crocker book and what it says. So you're really back for the small a Chinese immigrant.
Yeah. It too is doing some interesting work with balancing different stereotypes and expectations of who a person is. She is both the all-American homemaker, and she's of an immigrant community and new to America. This piece also does that bait and switch where it shows one card at a time, shows those expectations of who a person will be and how that person defies those expectations too. What else do people notice in this piece that's interesting? Fifi? What did you think?
I might be wrong on this, but I liked how the author ref the cookbook in the end, like as like a way to conclude it. It kind of just brought the whole piece together because she kind of goes off tangent about the second degree or like physics or something, and then she goes back to the cookbook, and I thought it like the author probably go back to the cookbook, and she kind of did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a way to know that the story is over, right? At just the most primordial level. You start with a cookbook and you end with a cookbook. You know you're at the ending of the story. I think one of the things that's interesting about the way that it comes back to the cookbook is it feels like you've gone through something of a journey with it. That at the beginning of the story, it introduces the author who growing up loved like flipping through this cookbook. But nowadays, when she looks at it, she's kind of horrified and finds it kind of hilarious, the things it has to say, the ways in which it can bump up against some nasty sexist truths of the American past. And so the end of this piece lands in this really interesting, conflicted place with her coming forward and talking to her mom about it. Like, don't you share these problems with me? And that message that she sort of says in response that's neither a yes nor a no, where it's like, I need to know how long to cook my turkeys, which is neither a denial of the fact that there is this pretty rampant gender bias and weird stereotyping that appears in the book, and also this sort of like pragmatic concern of, but I guess I kind of still need it. It's conflicted, it's complicated, but it does give us this feeling of resolution. What else? What are other things that people notice about this piece?
The alternating between quotes from the and like the storyline. It was interesting. Like some parts I didn't get, but like I get the quote like chicken at the turkey on Thanksgiving. Like if this is you must have grown up somewhere else, because she's talking about her mom being an immigrant.
Yeah. This is what we call, I don't know if we discussed this last time in class, but if we did, forgive me, and if we didn't, then now's a good time. A story and B story. How a lot of these effective short essays, it feels like there's one pathway and there's another pathway, and by the end they converge. In this story, it's the story of her relationship to her mother and the cookbook, and then there's all this B material of excerpts from the cookbook. And it's really satisfying to read, to see sort of the two juxtaposed against each other, particularly, like you mentioned, Esther, moments where the cookbook draws on something that's sort of charged about their identity, like their immigrant status, their sort of the feeling of growing up somewhere else, and that these may not be your traditions, but now inherit them, for whatever that may mean. It's interesting. What else is going on here? Is there anything that stylistically you would consider stealing? Anything that you really like that you'd want to try? There's something that I'd like to steal. I really admire the way that Eng here is telling a contemporary morality tale, but by the end allows for there to be this room for conflict between her and her mother, where she as an author is not okay with the sexism of this cookbook, and her mother is like, I need to know how to cook the turkeys. And there's something interesting about that, because that can be the nature of a family dynamic, that one person can be so certain about here's what the future should look like, and the other person can be like, I'm so used to this past, I don't know what it would be like to let go of it. Even if they are a phenomenally talented scientist and PhD phenomenally well-educated woman. I think that it manages to make its moral point about the history of sexism in this nation while also leaving room for the complexity of the relationship between her and her mom, and how her mom doesn't actually have the same perspective as her. And it troubles her, but also her mom ends up just saying that pragmatic thing at the end. You need to know how to cook the turkeys. Interesting. As Esther said, because we're dealing with indexing here, the beginning of this piece, no, it wasn't Esther who said it. Oh, whoever said it, kudos to you, about recognizing the fact that it begins and ends with the cookbook. Was that you, Fifi?
Yeah, it was.
Okay. Is there anything else that you all noticed or would like to share about this piece? Something that stood out to you? There's one other thing that I think is worth noting. Every piece at the beginning of the piece is about engaging the audience. I think that at the beginning of this piece, it's engaging an audience who is more likely to be in Eng's perspective, Celeste Eng's perspective. This one of, these lines from this old cookbook are really upsetting to me. She's bringing us in to be on her side, expecting her audience to be with us, so that in order that when she comes into conflict with her mom, we are sort of on her side and have to hear it out from her perspective. I think that's a valuable thing, and it's a really clever thing to be able to orient the beginning of your piece so that there's clearly a person we're following. And the reason why I talk about that is that transitions pretty well into what we're talking about here. We're talking about college application essays, where it's of vital importance that we are following you and your perspective. Samantha, it's actually going to be one of the things that we talk about in your piece, because I think one of the biggest ways in which you can make what you currently have even stronger is by landing us inside of your perspective, specifically yours, even quicker, and with a more clear voice about what is you and what is your family. But we'll come back around to that in due time. Before we do that, I want to open up the other two college essays that we were going to read for today, as well as one little joke. Is it time for a joke? I will take your silence as a yes, because I want it to be. All right, so I want to share with you all okay. Is it showing now? Come on, puppy, do your thing. I want to share with you all a piece that I often share toward the beginning of classes. It's still on this idea of indexing. Please don't answer, Esther, because I think I showed this to you last year in a class that I taught with you in it. But here we are. Okay. So this is about indexing. This is about the idea of making sure that what you're saying at the beginning manages to organize your reader's thoughts in the right direction. I forewarn you all, this is a trick. Okay. There's a certain index that we're looking for at the beginning of this paragraph. I want you to think about what you think this index could be. Isn't golf unbelievable? Golf courses are some of the best maintained, greenest land in the nation. Is there anything better than being out in the fresh air, out there in the nature? The biggest golf courses cover as many as 150 acres, but the average course is still 74 acres. That's a lot of open space. That's why I think there ought to be more people out on the golf course living the good life. If you ask me, I could practically be out there 24/7. So I know. This seems relatively straightforward. Seems like I'm probably playing with you, which I am. This is a trick question. What do you think the index of this paragraph is? It's an open-ended question.
I want to say maybe the sentence, because there are more golf courses than is golf.
So how would you begin this paragraph? What would you say ahead of this paragraph in order to orient the audience into thinking about it the way you want to?
Oh. Instead of just saying, isn't golf unbelievable, you can say, isn't golf courses, or aren't golf courses unbelievable? That
Sure.
would focus on the actual content.
Yeah. You are very close to the trick, because as I've said, there is a trick at play here. But you didn't quite find the trick, because I honestly don't expect you to. Does anyone else have something they would care to audition as a possibility? Okay. Well, if not, I'll share with you, and haha, it's all a trick. It's all been a ruse. So there's the one that's similar to the one that you just shared. Golf is the greatest sport because the courses are beautiful, nice, expansive space to feel free and easy. Right? That could very well be the topic sentence of this paragraph, right? I also suggest that it could be, we should turn all the golf courses into places for the homeless to live. Haha, it's a trick. But I want to look at that paragraph one more time. Golf courses are some of the best maintained, greenest land in the nation. Is there anything better than being out in the fresh air, in nature? Biggest golf courses cover as many as 150 acres. A lot of open space. There ought to be more people out on the golf course living the good life. ... So, again, this is all a joke, but it is in order to indicate something more serious. Because I think that all of us sometimes get caught in this problem where we think we have made the point we're trying to say very clear, but because there isn't a proper index in place, the reader reads it completely wrong. Like, if I was trying to make the argument about how golf courses should be the new place to house the homeless, I wouldn't want you to read this paragraph and think, aren't golf courses unbelievable? And similarly, if I were writing this paragraph and I wanted you to believe, aren't golf courses unbelievable and awesome and isn't golf a great sport? I'd be in big trouble if what you were thinking as you were reading the paragraph is, gosh, we really got to get the homeless out to live on the golf courses. Finally, we'd solve the homelessness problem. I realize this is all very silly, but does this make sense? I share this because it's sort of low stakes and feels sort of silly, and we can sort of make fun of it. But I think you'll find throughout the semester that we'll often be looking at paragraphs, and there'll be a conversation that we'll have to have where we'll deal with these brackets at the front, where we'll have to think about, we're not reading this paragraph correctly. What do we need to do to put at the top such that we don't think golf courses for the homeless when we should be thinking golf is awesome, and vice versa? So we'll toss that away and we'll move on to the next thing. Okay. I'm going to pull up both of those other two college essays from past students, and we're going to take a look at them. And then we will move on to your individual work. Okay, one moment, please. Okay. You aren't supposed to make friends with strangers on the internet. I love this piece. What was your experience with it? What did you like? What didn't you like? What confuses you? And what stylistically would you consider stealing? I would love to open the floor. I will start calling on you if you do not do it yourselves.
I like how she starts with he absolutely tomatoes, talks about her. Wait, can you guys be quiet? I'm in the class. Okay, sorry. And it ends with like boy still hates tomatoes. It's like,
It has a very clear beginning and ending. It does that thing where it indexes in a certain way, and when that piece comes back around, we feel like it's complete, right? What else is going on here that's effective? Or not? I'll say one of the things that I like, actually two things, because they're both things of the beginning. I think that the voice is really strong at the beginning, and it sets a really strong feeling of suspense. Like that opening, it makes you want to read more. It makes you very interested in this relationship. And I think that that goes a long way for her here. The other thing that I think is at play that's really strong is, okay, have we talked about stasis destabilization?
Yeah.
A little bit, yeah? Having a little trouble hearing all of you. Did we? We did talk a little bit about stasis destabilization, right?
Yeah, we did.
Okay. So there's a presumed stasis here. There's an expectation on the part of the author that I think is well assumed that the person reading this piece will think you're not supposed to make friends with strangers on the internet. That internet relationships are not as valid as in-person ones. So I think that what Maya has done here to pretty excellent effect is played off that stasis and made an argument that is sort of in dialogue with her expectations of what she thinks the reader's feelings are. Right? There's this one expectation of you're not supposed to make friends with strangers on the internet, and she argues for an alternative perspective. And she never has to like come out and say, I bet you think that you're not supposed to make friends with strangers on the internet, but I'm here to tell you this. All that is implicit, but it's part of what churns the essay forward, that knowing expectation of her reader. And that's the most important thing to be able to do, to figure out what your reader is expecting and satisfying it in the ways you want to, and denying them that satisfaction in the ways that you want to as well. One of the things that the famous filmmaker Hitchcock used to say, the director of movies like Vertigo and The Birds and Psycho, is, I want to give the audience exactly what they want, but in a completely different way from the way they were expecting it. That's an interesting way of thinking about it. In any event, what Maya does here is she sets some problem that she's grappling with, the stasis of that you're not supposed to make friends with strangers on the internet, and finds the way of engaging with it such that she demonstrates this very interesting alternative perspective. What else is going on here? What else did you all enjoy or not enjoy? What else did you all notice?
I really liked the syntactical strategy that the author uses, the sense fragments that really fits her confident and assertive tone, I think.
Yeah. She does use these fragments reasonably often, and it makes her sound assertive. She seems like a personality, right? It's really cool when one's writing can do that. What else is going on here that works? What else would you consider stylistically stealing?
One thing I liked about this essay was towards the end when she said like all books have like girl and girl, a boy saves girl or something. Like how I guess that's what you were saying, how it, like her alternate proposal was boy meets girl, girl saves boy, boy saves girl, girl suddenly invisible at parties. I felt like that was a way to wrap up their relationship in just a couple words or in a couple simple statements. That was really really strong.
It gives you what you want, but not in the way you expected it.
Yeah.
That's a thing that we end up talking about in my filmmaking classes all the time in grad school. We're often talking about how can you give the audience what they want to see, but in a way they weren't expecting it. How can you give that quality where it is still satisfying, but it has something different to it than what the audience's first reaction would be? Are there other things that speak to you all here, or shall we go on and move along? There's one other thing I would like to share. This is an unusual college essay because it's not about her activities all that much. It's about her very unique and hard-won perspective. And I would argue it is every bit as successful as many other Common Apps that we read here, but also just Common Apps that I read in general, because her personality is so clear and so awesome and so attractive that it doesn't matter that she's not talking about her internship or about the time that she won first prize at whatever competition it may happen to be. The fact that the thing that is selling her here is the vivacity and strength of her character. And that's kind of really cool. how hardworking she is at her job. Okay, I want to move on to the other one, and then we're going to move on to your work. Let's talk about keep going. I'm very interested to hear what you all have to say on this one. What works here? What doesn't work here? What perhaps confuses you? And what stylistically would you consider stealing?
I was very surprised when I read the sentence because I thought it was rather cliche and overused, but I thought it wasn't horrible because it did tie into the rest of the essay pretty well.
I agree. One of the things I like about that opening sentence is that the most broad version of that sentence is very cliched. The idea of like, it doesn't matter whether you win or lose, it's how you play the game. Or like, it's not about the destination, but the journey. But the fact about making it very specific about racing makes it a little bit less cliched. And I think that that's a really good lesson to learn in this essay writing process, that if you ever find yourself with a sentence like you're like, oh God, this is so cliched, you think about it and you go, how do I make this specific enough with respect to the thing that I'm talking about in order to make it a little bit less so? And I agree, it does a good job of framing the rest of the story. How does it frame the rest of the story? What do we anticipate based on that opening? That is not a rhetorical question.
I think what we can expect is a story in which what Matt got in the middle had the most significance. I feel like that's what that opening line speaks for.
Yes. We know that it's going to be something about the significance of the middle. I think we can also know for certain that it's going to be somehow about someone who's a racer, whether we know he's a runner yet, he or she, I guess, at that point. Whether he or she is a runner, we don't know, but we'll know that he or she is a racer in some respect. What else? What else is going on here that speaks to you?
There's another one of those two stories merged into one essays, like
It is.
race. Yeah, and then like Grandpa Bob, and I was really confused until he talked about grand family for the race, and then everything after that, and it just made sense.
It's satisfying, right? To watch those two separate things kind of converge.
Yeah.
It's an effective mode. When in doubt, it's a good way to go because it means there's always a place that you're headed to. What else is effective about this piece?
I really like how he applied the advice that he got from, not exactly advice, he heard his grandma say to his grandfather, I think, you go ahead with your long legs. He applied that to himself and he took that lesson to heart, where he saw how his grandpa was able to keep going with his long legs and he learned from his grandpa.
Yeah. I think that there's a nice subtlety to it. Like, a good reader will catch all of that without him having to explicitly name that. Because it's all there. good catch, because yeah, that's all going on. I think there are a couple of really effective repetitions in this piece. I think he keeps on using that phrase, like the long legs. He keeps on talking about to keep going, keeps on talking about bananas, and he keeps on talking about what happens in between. And the fact that he has all of those little bits and pieces that he continually comes back to, even before the story actually has both parts connect, everything feels oriented to itself. It may be a little jarring at first how it jumps, but it's using the same sorts of phrases between the two. And I mean, that's all Will. This particular author, he does a lot of speech. And so he does a lot of the kind of writing that reuses phrases, that recycles those phrases in order to build upon themselves. And I think he used that part of his personality quite effectively in making this piece function. I want to point out two sentences that I completely admire in this work. Grandpa Bob had been living alone for 7 years after Grandma Norma passed on. He left the house they had lived in for 60 years and moved into a retirement home, but did not slow down or break his routine. I want to point out how he just covered so much exposition so fast. Like, there are all sorts of other details that he could have included, but here he manages to tell the story of decades in 2 lines. That's incredibly hard. And I think it's part of why this piece has the propulsiveness it does, because there's this really full history behind it that Will knows very well. This is not what an early draft looks like, but when you strip away the unnecessary details, this is what you can get to, where it feels like there's this very whole history in the background, but you don't get to know. The author knows, the characters know, you have an idea, but that's all. Anything else? Anything else that you all would like to point out about this piece? Okay. There's one more thing I would like to point out. There's a certain tone that he manages to use in this paragraph. I'm a very mental racer. Many runners are. One of the hardest things to do in this kind of writing, in application writing, or really all nonfiction essay, is managing to appropriately talk about your appropriately talking about your expert knowledge. Finding the right tone that happens to both be as smart and lucid as it should be, but also not come off as arrogant or all-knowing. There's sort of this quality to this paragraph where we both believe what he has to say, and he's quite articulate in talking about his experience with running, but he also doesn't come off as a know-it-all. It has this quality of, this is the way that I think about my sport, and it's a valid one. And that's a skill that all of us who are writing essay should try and develop. The ability to talk about the thing that we talk about in a way that both feels like expert writing and doesn't feel like the author is condescending to us, where they have something to share with us, and they're going to. Is there anything else that you all would like to point out about this piece, or shall we go ahead and move on? Okay. All right. Thank you so much for all of your reading. How we doing? I'm just going to check in on time to make sure that we time this well. That's about perfect, save for the fact that we don't have our third workshop today. So, typically what we do is we do about half-hour workshop sections for everyone's work, but today we don't have Vincent, who I believe was our third for the day, which is a little bit of a problem, but I'll talk with the organizers and we'll look at it. For now, I think what we should do is, Fifi and Samantha, you both said that you didn't have as much time as you would have liked to read each other's work. Here's what I'm going to say. We're going to take a break until 8:10. That's 8 minutes from now. All of you feel free, grab something to drink, grab a bite to eat, go to the bathroom, whatever you happen to need to do, and we'll reconvene now in 7 minutes, and we'll enter workshop sessions. If that sounds good to everyone, I'm going to pour myself some sparkling water, and we'll get started again momentarily. Cool?
Cool.
Great. Sounds good. All right, we'll talk soon. Bye. Do we have everyone here? We're of course not going to get properly started until 8:10. I just thought of something I sort of want to share with you all. So as I've sort of said and talked about a little bit, I'm a filmmaker. That's what I do. I direct movies, and I just finished writing a feature-length script that I'm trying to turn into something. All which is to say, for the past 2 weeks or so, I've been seeing so many movies. I've been seeing a movie almost every single day. And in terms of the conversation we've been having in class, there's something that happens in most movies that is like the indexing that we talk about together in class. In that it's kind of remarkable, and I suggest you start doing this as you watch movies yourselves. If you're watching at home, hit the pause button about 15 minutes into the movie, give or take. There's going to be some major inciting incident that happens there. And if you pause at that spot, almost all the time, you know who the main characters are, what they're like, and what they'll do, the conflict, the main conflict of the movie, and you'll have some inkling of what must happen in order for the story to end. And more times than not, again, I mean, I have said in the past that I'm not a huge fan of structure. That's not really true. I love structure when it's done in an artful way. And I have a problem with a 5-paragraph essay structure from high school because it gives no flexibility. But I'm very fond of the way that one can read movies or read essays in this way, where within the first 15 minutes, you get to know a lot of the stuff that you need to know in order to watch the movie correctly. In the first minute, you learn how to watch the movie correctly. In the 14 that follow, you know what's at stake and what will need to happen for the story to end. I say all of this because sometimes it's easier thinking about this work in terms of like your favorite Pixar movies than it may be thinking of essay. Serious question. Have all of you watched Up? I do too. I think it's a great movie. Esther, are you with us?
Oh yeah, I'm not sure if I watched the whole thing a long time ago. So
Okay. Well, I won't give anything away other than what's sort of clear. The thing that's kind of remarkable about Up is within that first heartbreaking 2 minutes, you know how to watch the movie. You know that it's about an old man who very recently suffered the horrible heartbreak of losing the love of his entire life. And then within the first 15 minutes, you know that it's about him making this crazy choice to fly their house with balloons to the place they always promised they would go together but never did. And you know that the story will be over when he gets there and he completes the rites of what he promised to his wife. It doesn't happen the way that you necessarily expected, and you get Doug involved and yada, yada, yada. But those 15 minutes teach you both how to watch the movie and everything that you need to know in order to know what to expect and how you're supposed to be satisfied by the end. There are movies that are not necessarily as good at doing it, but almost always Pixar gets it totally right because they're so awesome. Anyway, I want to get back started again, but I want to compel you all, for the next little while as you watch movies, think about that quality. Think about that indexing effect and how it makes those certain promises. And I promise you that your writing will probably improve as a result. When the question no longer is about, here's how I need to fit into the existing structure, but rather becomes, what do I need my audience to think? And when do I need them to think it? So, let's launch into the submitted pieces for this week. I was so excited. They look so good. I'd love to, Fifi, Samantha, coin toss. Does one of you want to go first?
I call tails.
Who is that who called tails? Is that
Fifi.
Fifi? Okay. I shouldn't have said coin toss. I'm not sure if I have a coin on me. All right, tails. See, there's a coin.
Yep.
I'm not lying. That's tails. Fifi, you're first. All right, let's pull it on up. Give me just 1 second. If all of you would actually open it up to, please don't make any notes directly onto her document, but Fifi, feel free to, as we're going through all of this ourselves.
Okay.
And I hope that all of you have some pre-written notes. If you don't, you can take this time as we're reading through to sort of compile some so that we have things to say to her. And both Fifi and Samantha, I have like full red inked Word documents that I'm going to send you at the end of class today. But I figure first have our group discussion. So let's pull it on up.
Wait, if I'm vacant page.
Pardon? What was that?
No, nothing. I'm just talking to myself.
Oh, okay, that's fine. I'd like to say, ask loud and proud. There are no dumb questions. Watch me struggle with this forever. There we go. All right, great, excellent. Morning Star. Let me make sure that we've got that shared with everyone. Have it in front of us here. Great. Is that document what's showing up on your screen now? In the share?
Yeah.
Great. If you would all give me 1 moment to find my notes that I wrote up for Esther, so I can, sorry, not for Esther, excuse me, for Fifi, just so that I am a little more organized here. I'll be ready to go. Okay. By now, you all should be reasonably familiar with this. So let's talk it out. What's working here? What isn't working here? What by chance confuses you? And what do you think that Fifi should think about between this iteration and the next to make it a more realized version of itself? But let's start with the good stuff first. What's really working here? I love the fact that you're Morningstar. I love that as a guiding principle at the very beginning and end. And it is the beginnings of one of those really excellent tied together beginnings and conclusions. That's really excellent. Much to be very proud of. What else? What else is going on here?
I really like your second paragraph of like how your day goes at Walden West.
What do you like about it?
Like yeah, you go for like from morning to night, and I could see like each scene happening kind of.
Yeah. It's the day in the life of a counselor, which for all of us who are uninitiated, it's kind of fun to learn what the inside scoop. What else? What else is going on here that's really great? I think there's something very promising at play here, that there's still some work to get there, but I like it a lot. That there's this quality of you helping Sea Turtle when she's sort of in the dark and scared and needs help. And later on in the story, you reveal that experience when you were younger of really needing help, of almost repeating second grade, but your parents refusing, and happening upon that new teacher who became your mentor. It creates this nice generational effect where you have this mentor who's a teacher, and then later on you get to be the mentor who's helping this kid who's sort of struggling. It's going to take a little bit of reordering things, but that could be really, really effective. What else is going on here that's great?
I like how Phoebe refers to the mic. It just gives it that personal touch that really shows how attached she is to them and how they look up to her as a leader.
Yeah, it's really good. We believe you. What else really works? Or if we're ready for it, what are other things that Fifi should think about in order to improve this piece? Fifi?
Yes.
Other than the obvious one that we are calling you by all the time, do you have multiple nicknames?
I do. Some of my more, like Fifi, my most common one. My other one is Theo. I get that one a lot. those are the two. Some people call me Poe, as in the panda, Poe. I get Fee Fi Fo Fum.
I like that.
I get Fiona, which personally angers me just a bit, but yeah, I think those one I encounter like daily.
Okay. There's a reason why I asked that question. It was a loaded question. The reason why I asked is because it's a little disorienting to me when I read that as the opening sentence, because I don't know you have multiple nicknames.
Okay.
And so it starts me in a place of thinking that this is going to be a piece that's about nicknames. And we never actually return to that. And they're just small syntactical changes that you can make in order for it to not read that way. You could very easily just start with a phrase, my nickname is Morningstar. The morning star is Venus or the North, blah, blah, blah. But this is an example of where you want to make sure that each card that you're turning over in the right order. Now, don't feel like you need to make any edits right now. And since this is the first time that we're like looking at this closely, I want to make sure that you all are keeping multiple drafts as you're moving along. So that way you have an edit history and can go back if there's something you changed that you don't love. Have as many documents as possible. But as you go through now, yeah, let's talk about some things that might be adjusted. Okay. I usually front load a lot of comments at the beginning. Here's one that, if you'll forgive me, I want to talk about as a class because it's one that all of us should be paying attention to. Okay? It is my nature name in Walden West Outdoor School, which allows fifth graders to explore environmental science. I think that this could become a much stronger sentence with a couple of edits. This is something that we're going to talk about a lot later on, and I think it's what my technical lecture for next class is. It's called Actor Action. What you probably will have talked about in high school coursework is about how you want to make sure that you have a strong subject-verb pair at the beginning of your sentences. I talk about actor action because it's a bit of a more loaded term. In active, engaging writing, usually the beginnings of sentences have actors and the actions they are performing. If you think about it that way, there's a much better way of constructing the sentence because currently the actor is it, and the action it performs is. I am not specifically critical of the passive voice. I'm only critical of the passive voice when it obscures meaning and when it makes the person sound like a less active person, which is one of the most important things to do in a college essay. The other thing that I want to draw attention to, which is a red flag to know that you're doing something like this, is when you say something allows something to do something. Typically speaking, it's a way that we all have learned in order to be able to string things together, but it's preventing you from using the most active language in the sentence. So a way you could resolve this, not the way, but a way that immediately makes it a stronger sentence is, at Walden West Outdoor School, campers explore environmental science. Or, I received my nature name at Walden West Outdoor School whenever you did. A camp where camp where elementary school students and older explore environmental science. We always want for the actor to be a very explicit actor, like something we recognize as an actor, and more often that's a person or an animal, or if necessary, an organization. What we're trying to get away from is legalese.
Okay.
Actually, I know the right example to give right here. We can sort of crap on Thomas Jefferson a little bit. When in the course of human events it becomes is the subject of that sentence. Actually, it's in the course of human events it, and the verb is becomes. And for that kind of 18th century academic writing, it can work quite well. But when we're trying to make our writing as clear and lucid as possible, we want to, as much as possible, make the people at the center, right? Right. I want to talk a little bit about structure throughout this piece, Fifi. Is that all right?
Yep.
Cool. I am going to be sending you a message with all of this. So I'll try and go through it a little bit slowly. I just want to say it with the whole class so that we have an opportunity to sort of talk and discuss. Or if you disagree, we can argue about it, because it is your writing and ultimately they are your choices to make. I think this paragraph, one time I supervised girls from a less privileged school, ... This paragraph is not currently oriented within the full story. It sort of feels like it's coming out of left field as a non sequitur, but it really isn't, because it's really important material to the story. Does that make sense?
So I'd have to work on like the connections between like the word, the transition between paragraph seeing it and the one after.
I think part of the problem is because we're jumping back and forward in time without the ligaments to support it.
Okay.
So a suggestion that you can take if you want to is to start in the place of, my nickname is Morning Star, the significance of that nickname, Walden West, and those orienting details. And perhaps ending that section about like when you were a camper. Then in the second part, you talk about your struggles when you were young and the fact that in second grade you were almost held back, but then you received the help of a really kind mentor. And that's the place to talk about that, how mentorship is so important to you. Then, if in the next paragraph you come back to the idea of when you return to Walden West as a counselor and how you are trying to provide the kind of help to young people that you received from your fifth grade teacher at the new school. And then if you tell the story of Sea Turtle there and helping her through the dark, if it is effectively done, it will echo as a story of giving an assistance to a reincarnation of yourself.
Yeah, okay.
We see you as a young person at Walden West, you as a person in school with a challenge, then you back at Walden West, and then a younger version of you who you help.
Okay.
And then by the end of the story, you can land exactly where you do about seeing your students during the school year. That last beat about what the Morning Star is, about how it gives guidance, is really quite lovely and beautiful. If you give us a little bit more at the beginning,
Yeah.
then we'll anticipate that, and when that comes around and we get the full story, it'll be more satisfying and we'll know it's the ending.
Okay, cool. I like that.
Okay. So I'm going to send you a Word document that has that written out. So if you didn't follow that entirely as we were talking about it, you can look at it again. But
Perfect.
I think right here, this experience has made me strive to be a better person. I want to be a morning star of Venus, the brightest planet which appears in the east before sunrise. I think that's absolutely right. We just, at the top of the piece, we need you to name what the morning star is. My nickname at Walden West is Morning Star, after the planet Venus, the brightest star in the sky, the one that we follow, blank, blank, blank. And if we have that at the beginning, when we circle around at the end, it will be satisfying.
Okay.
Okay. There's one other thing I want to bring up that gets us a little bit into the nitty-gritty. And you should know that because I'm doing this, you're doing really well and you're pretty far along. I want to look at one sentence. This can apply to other things throughout the piece. Okay, actually, it's the third sentence of the piece. I really am particularly difficult on openings. With good reason, it's the thing that people read most closely. But, okay. In this third sentence, people who aren't Fifi, what is the sentence telling you is the most important thing to take away from this sentence? What is the idea we are supposed to think?
Pause the name thing?
Would you say that a little louder, Esther?
Name thing jumps out at me first because it's the first thing I read.
Yeah, absolutely right, Esther. It's no more complicated than that. The very beginning of the sentence will always be the prominence position. It will be the part of the sentence that readers read most closely. I would point out, Fifi, that in this third sentence, the thing that we all clock is students have to use nature names at Walden West. When I think what you want us to be thinking here is about your experiences as a cabin leader all of those years in high school.
Okay, yeah.
Is that true?
Yes.
So this is certainly not as big a problem and much more easily solved than the golf example from before. But here's an example of ways in which idea flow and indexing can significantly influence the way that someone reads what you're saying. Just inverting that sentence, at Walden West, I have volunteered as a cabin leader since 9th grade. Everyone knows me as Morning Star because at Walden West, we use nature names instead of our real names. Just the act of inverting it makes us hear the other part first.
Okay.
It's a really stupid, really powerful thing. So when you sit down to go through and edit and make adjustments, there's some restructuring in terms of where paragraphs go throughout this piece that I think you can improve. And you'll be able to look at the notes there that I have on my sheet and follow your good thoughts, follow your heart. I'm sure you'll do really well. the other thing to think about is how to orient us at the very beginning of this piece. Just as an exercise right now, if this were the first 15 minutes of your movie, what are the things that we must know at the beginning of this story?
Technically, those all and my personal experience, I think those are the things I'd like to include in first minute.
Would you repeat that one more time? What are the specific things that we need to know?
Yeah. Okay. So the nickname, what the camp is, or at least talk about that. In my personal experience,
So
I was younger.
We need to know my nickname is Morningstar.
Mm-hmm.
We need to know why the hell is that? i.e., what is Walden West?
Yes.
And then we need to know what your experience there was. And I think that at this point in the story, we need to know what your experience there was like as a camper, right? Am I right about that or am I wrong? Push back if I'm wrong.
I feel like I want to talk about not me as a camper, just me when I was younger.
So when you were a cabin leader, when you were a cabin leader, were you a counselor?
Those are the same thing, so yes.
I don't know that.
Okay.
So that's a thing to know.
Why would that be relevant?
Because otherwise your reader will misread your writing. They'll think that cabin leader means like the person who the counselor has appointed in charge of their cabin as like their assistant leader, as opposed to the one who is leading the cabin entirely.
Okay.
I don't know if that's true for sure. Let's actually ask around. Did other people have that reaction, or when you heard cabin leader, did you think counselor?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that? I didn't hear you. The connection cut off.
I'm sorry about that. When you all read cabin leader, did you think counselor, or did you think camper who has authority? Not a rhetorical question. I did too. I assumed it meant camper with authority.
So if I changed cabin leader to counselor, that would mean, well, person who's in charge, not just her, who's in charge of the cabin.
It's not necessarily just the phrase cabin leader. It could also be the way that the sentence is constructed. I imagine were you to say, the camp directors chose me as the cabin leader for my group when I was in 9th grade, we would think that you are basically a counselor. But the act of saying I volunteered as a cabin leader, I think that partially gives us that that implication. I don't know.
See, okay.
It's writing, and it's not 1 + 1. It's experimental. It's figuring out what is the thing that actually feels right. But okay, So the things that we definitely need to know at the beginning of this piece is your nickname is Morningstar. I would actually addend also what the hell is that in addition to why the hell is that. So like, what is the Morning Star? My nickname is Morningstar. This is what the Morning Star is. This is why I have that nickname, meaning Walden West. And I've been a cabin leader there for many years.
Yes.
Does that feel fair? Does that feel right?
I just have one question now.
Shoot.
So I think you mentioned before that I should probably my preferences when I was younger. How would I incorporate that into beginning?
How long have you been going to Walden West? When did you go for the first time?
Ninth.
So you went for the first time in 9th grade. You were never there as a younger camper?
I was at a similar camper.
So that may be worth getting into, but honestly, that may turn things a little complicated. I think the place that I got confused was because when we're dealing with the kid who is really scared sea turtle, that doesn't sound like the behavior of a teenager. I imagine she was a younger kid, yes?
Yes.
So if you don't give us those details, sometimes us as readers, we can come to stupid conclusions. In this case, I didn't, but then I was confused elsewhere because I didn't know when you were a counselor for young kids and when you were the de facto cabin leader of people your own age.
I was not. Wait. Now you're getting me confused. Okay. I've never been where I count for people my own age. It's only for the younger kids.
So you've been a counselor to the younger kids.
Yes.
And you've been cabin leader for the kids your own age.
No, because the cabin leader and cat same thing. So I kind of it's like interchangeable. You can use them. Is that not explicitly mentioned in the writing?
We don't have ages. We can intuit the ages, but it's not explicitly there. Here's a place that some more of that detail can come in. I feel like a mother for my cabin because being with 14 to 18 girls requires constant love and attention. Are they preteens or are they younger than that?
They're like 10 or
11. So that's a detail we should probably know there, just in order to clock it, right?
But I thought I had it in the second sentence where it said it's for 5th grade. Now I'm being now.
Which allows 5th graders to explore environmental science.
Yeah, so essentially there's like 14 to 18 girls who are 14 to 18 5th grade girls in a cabin.
I get confused. I can't tell you for certain why. I think it's in part because 14 to 18 makes me think that's the age, which I know they're not. And
Okay.
when you say 5th graders to explore environmental science, I assume that's a gloss in terms of like, that's about the age people are, but I don't know that that's the age of the students in your cabin.
Okay.
And I think the reason I don't know that is because in this sentence, it's saying, in Walden West Outdoor School, which allows 5th graders to explore environmental science.
Right.
And if you were saying, at Walden West, I teach 5th graders interesting parts of environmental science, then we will know that they are your kids.
So I have to change like the sentence structure and the wordings to make it more clear.
I think as much as possible, getting either you or students into the subject position of these sentences will help it be clearer.
Okay.
I also would say that there are places where your verb choices can help that too. I feel like a mother for my cabin because caring for 15 girls requires constant love and attention is even a little bit more clearer than being with, right?
Okay.
But again, we're getting into some pretty nitty-gritty stuff. We're getting in pretty closely. And the fact that that's true means that your work is pretty far along and you have much to be quite proud of.
Okay.
Do other people have notes that they would like to share on this piece? Things that they think could be things for Fifi to think about? If not, then we're going to wrap this on up. Fifi, you have much to be really proud of here. You've done a really great job. I'm quite impressed. And most of the things to deal with here are normal revision type of things. I want to compel you to look a little bit at spelling and grammar type of stuff. It's not a big deal. It's still towards the very beginning. There's plenty of time. I also want you to read your work out loud. I always say this over and over again throughout the course to the point of being a broken record. There's kind of no better way of making sure that writing is clear and well-paced than testing reading it out loud and seeing whether it feels comfortable coming out of your mouth. Often enough, you'll find that if you don't know when to take a breath, the sentence is poorly paced. If you sort of get jumbled or don't know how to say a thing, usually the syntax is a little off, etc. I'm going to say this to all of you all the time, but for now, do read out loud before the next time you turn in. But I think that you're looking really good here, and there's some things that you can do to make it even better. But great work. Last notes?
Yeah.
Going once, going twice?
Wait, just curious. Do you choose your own name in the camp? They give you the name.
Yeah, you choose your own name and that just sticks with you and you can't ever change it back.
Oh, okay. Nice.
That's a good detail. So we'll leave it on Esther's good question. Really great work. Thank you. Thank you for going first. It's always hard to go first, and You did a lovely job. So now we're going to jump over to Samantha. We're going to look at her piece. If there's any leftover time today, I mean, today was supposed to be Vincent's workshop, but he is not here. Esther, Helen, did you happen to complete anything that you'd like to talk about with us, or not? I mean, of course, it isn't your time to, so I wouldn't expect it. But is there something you'd like us to look at?
Yeah, I have like a small piece that I'm not sure where I'm gonna use it, but like the I was wondering if you could like look over it.
Cool. Well, then we'll try and leave just a little bit of time at the very end that we can sort of discuss. Where do you have it right now?
It's in my personal folder, so I'll move it over.
Cool, great. We can jump over to there after we finish with Samantha's workshop. All right. Let's go on and pull it up. Fifi, great job. Really great job. Okay. Let's talk about Samantha. Samantha's work. We could also talk about Samantha, but let's talk about her work mostly. All right. What's going on here? What's working? What isn't working? What confuses you? And what should Samantha think about between this iteration and the next in order to turn this piece into the most realized version of itself? I'll go first. There are a couple of really wonderful images here. The way that you talk about being with your family in Italy is great. And the details about you being in the Beijing airport, it's a really great start. It's hectic and frustrating, and I feel like I'm there. That works really well. What else is going on here? What is worthy of note?
I don't know. I just really like her style. Like, I also like her other styles, like short sentences and everything. But I love your like adjectives and everything.
Good. What else?
I like how each paragraph kind of flowed into the other, and like I also like the adjective and how she puts her, and it makes it coherent, eloquent, like just overall just really nice.
There's a really great use of language here. There's some big 25-cent words that reinforce just what a great control you have over language.
I also like your progression, like we're like only thinking new experiences are good.
Yeah. I was going to go into that a little bit shortly, because that's where my biggest critiques come from. Not to where the actual conflict is coming from, but structure. Again, always structure. What other things are going on here that are great? I love hearing stories about being a fish out of water. They're always really interesting to hear about, and there's a lot of natural tension and challenge there. It lends itself well to good storytelling. I think you've set yourself up for success by talking about this experience of visiting China away from your family. It's a really great premise. What else is going on here?
Wait, just curious. So you were like complete strangers with these kids that are like in Beijing with?
Sorry, could you repeat that question?
These kids you were in Beijing with, were you complete strangers before, or were you
Yeah.
already Okay.
Yeah.
Actually, you know what, Samantha? That would actually be a great thing to take note of. If
Okay.
your reader didn't realize that these people were complete strangers, which I wasn't sure about, I figured that was true, but I didn't know. That'd be a good thing to explicitly say.
Okay.
What I thought while I was reading it, that the paragraph talked about like home, and I thought it would be some like great story about that. And I thought that when you guys were traveling to, China, towards the end, of drifted away from that topic, and you said, "Oh, there's so much great joy in seeking the world, the unknown," and I thought that was just from your introduction paragraph, how I didn't think that it didn't tie in nicely, or there's just something not there. Because I feel like you started out great, and then you ended with I just thought that could have maybe the essay could be stronger if you maybe tied it back into the intro.
I agree. And there's some, it may be time to actually jump into that right now. I think you too, Samantha, there's some stuff that you can do in terms of indexing at the beginning, in terms of problem construction. Have I used problem construction as a phrase with you all before?
I don't think you have.
Okay. It's the same sort of deal. It's like the idea of stasis destabilization. It's just good to have multiple terms and ways of thinking about it. Usually in, be it a movie or be it a piece of scientific writing, the very beginning of the piece is going to set up some sort of way that the world is, and then it'll push you into a new one. There'll be some sort of inciting incident that changes the world entirely. Or, alternatively, in a piece of science writing, it's like, here is what the commonly believed situation about the world with respect to the scientific issue may happen to be. I'll deal with one that I won't sound like a fool talking about because science is not my forte. Historically speaking, if we were talking about Copernicus and whether the world is whether our solar system is heliocentric or geocentric, the argument would have been like, previously, all of these famous people, important scientists, smart folks have believed that the world, that the solar system, and including the sun, rotates around the Earth. But because of this new information that I have realized, actually, it rotates around the sun. And you want to build up that stasis, that argument, as well as you possibly can. So that way, when you take it down, what you've taken down is actually pretty dramatic. Me and my friends often talk about this when it comes to superhero movies. Because the superheroes who've actually done something that's really exciting tend to be the ones in movies where their antagonist is really strong. We remember The Dark Knight because of the Joker. And part of the reason why Black Panther is so much fun to watch is because of the fact that Killmonger, the Michael B. Jordan character, kind of has a point. All of which is to say, the strength of a protagonist is proportional to the strength of their antagonistic forces. So, at the beginning of this piece, we get this introduction to your family as home and how so long as you're with your family, you're okay. And here's your first experience being out on your own. What I think we need to get a much stronger idea of is what a challenge it is to break that stasis. how that is such an ingrained thing that when you make that move, it is not just a meanwhile in the summer between 9th and 10th grade, I attended a 2-week-long camp in Sichuan. Doesn't give us the right impression. It's like, but then I went to China on my own, and that was hard. And then we'll get a much better idea of the changed circumstance, and that'll give us a much clearer idea in the end of the resolution. Because that problem construction isn't currently in place, that's why the end can't yet satisfy as much as it will. That was a lot of talking. Does that make sense? Do people have thoughts? Do people have comments? I want to have the same conversation that we just had with Fifi's piece, but talking about yours. What are those orienting details that your audience must receive at the beginning of this piece in order to read it correctly?
They need to know that I feel most comfortable when I'm with my family, people who I'm familiar with.
I feel most comfortable with my family. Absolutely, that's a part of it. What's another part of it?
Let's see. I guess exposure to the unknown is what brought me out of that mentality. It's not something that can be taught. It has to be.
Exposure to the unknown has brought you out of what mentality?
Perhaps mentality of feeling comfortable only in specific situations, but now I can seek that other.
Okay, so that is flipping a late card too early.
Mm-hmm.
That's a piece of the resolution, right?
Yeah.
What we want at the beginning are the orienting details we need to know and a very early sense of what the problem is.
Okay.
I have a certain set of suggestions that I make in my edits that I'll email to you at the end of class today. If I were behind the wheel on this, and again, I say that in the conditional because these are your choices to make, the orienting details I need to know are, I feel most comfortable with my family. I have traveled a lot with them, but I have never traveled alone.
Okay.
Right? Because if you can land that idea, that prepares us for the challenge of the essay, which is, now I have to figure it out on my own. Right?
Yeah.
So there is a stupid Josh worded version of this that I'm going to put in that chat box just so that there's something to react to. I don't want you to necessarily use it. I just want you to think about it. A way that this piece could start is, I had rarely been away from my family. Though my family often goes away. We travel a lot. Another way that you could start is, my family raised me to believe, so long as we're together, we are home. The idea is to come up with some sort of pithy idea that orients us to thinking through your perspective about all of these ideas at the same time and makes us anticipate what is the problem going to be.
Mm-hmm.
Here, I had rarely been away from my family, though my family often goes away. We travel a lot. You can anticipate the problem's going to be, oh, but she's going to go away from her family. My family raised me to believe so long as we're together, we're home. Well, what happens when we're no longer together?
Okay, so this is pretty much setting it up and making readers some change from what I had stated initially.
The idea is to send them down the avenue of thinking and anticipating in the ways you want them to.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Again, these are your choices to make, but I would probably end up cutting most of that first paragraph in favor of just introducing them to the conflict or introducing them to this idea, and then giving this example of being in Italy and your family functioning normally as you're locked outside of the B&B. Like, that to me speaks volumes and tells us this whole story in one quick anecdote. And if you were to do that, you could probably get to the Beijing airport by the second paragraph. And if you were to do that, you would be functioning like the 15 minutes of a movie. Here is the stasis. Bam. Here is the destabilization. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I definitely like the change. It kind of jumps right into it, and it's definitely that way.
Cool. You'll do as you will. Yeah. Okay. What was the other thing that I wanted to bring up? Does anyone else have any more comments that they would like to share with Samantha? What are things that she should think about in order to improve this piece? I love a lot of the details that happen in the Beijing airport paragraph. Did anyone else get disoriented? That is not a rhetorical question. Did anyone else get disoriented? I did. There are a couple of sentences in here that I think may be too long for your own good, unless it's a stylistic choice to bring about that feeling of anxiety in the reader as they're reading through this thing that keeps on piling on top of itself. That could be a stylistic choice, but if so, I want you to commit to it whole hog. Otherwise, I want you to think about cutting up some of these sentences so the images flash a little bit more clearly and separately. That's a stylistic choice.
Yeah, as sentences are getting too long, and I was aiming to shorten them for the edits that are to come.
Again, I wanted to be open-ended on that because that could be an effective stylistic choice where it's like, and there was the fan that made everything hotter, and there were the lines that they forced us to be in, and there was the kid who wouldn't do with a frickin' passport. It would be a reasonable way to do it in that run-on style. But if that's not what you're intending, you should go in the other direction.
I have a question, though.
Yes.
If style for this particular section, would I have to do it?
Would you repeat that one more time?
If I was to add the run-on style, would it be more effective to use that just for the experience in the Beijing airport, or should I apply that entirely?
You should only apply that style to where you want to accomplish the effect that that style will imbue. So if you want to disorient the reader and make them feel like, oh my God, there's so many things, I feel so anxious, only do that in the sections of the essay where we should have those feelings.
Okay. So then I'm thinking maybe for when I'm writing, I can make that really clear, really concise, kind of almost iconic. But then when I talk about China, I can make it a bit more chaotic and long-winded.
Sure. That'd be really cool to see.
Okay, I'll try that.
Yeah. The biggest thing is that your style support the substance.
Yeah.
Are any of you musical theater fans? One of my favorite writers of musicals, his name is Stephen Sondheim. He's written most of the important, if you ask your parents, they'd probably say, Josh is wrong. He has written many of the most important musicals of the second half of the 20th century, including West Side Story. He was responsible for the lyrics too. One of the big things he always talks about when he's in interviews is that content dictates form. So you try and make sure that the way that you're telling something matches the thing that you're trying to tell. It's particularly true in musical theater, but it's no less true in narrative expository writing. I get confused here in a way I don't think you want me to be confused. Why is the boarding gate in Chinese if you are traveling to Sichuan? Is this a layover in Beijing on the way to another Chinese city? And if so, why was there an 18-hour flight left to go?
This is when we're, I guess, like, because describing the signs in Chinese, that was when we're actually returning from Sichuan to Beijing, and then from would be another 18 hours. It's a bit and logical because it should be when we're returning back from China, but at that point it was destroying the story. So I think the only solution to this that would make most sense would be deleting the part where I said the signs were disorienting.
Okay. But again, yeah, I mean, then this full sentence probably would have to go because it's saying that we try to find our boarding gate using our subpar Chinese. Oh, that makes me want to bring something up as well. You have a really interesting potential here that I want you to think about. We're going to talk about this more extensively as we go through this semester, but I believe good writing is always thinking about its reader. And you can probably pretty safely assume that the person who ends up reading this piece at the schools around the nation will look something like me, right? There'll be a 20 or 30 something white guy or girl with limited experience with Chinese. So when you're walking through, you have this really interesting perspective as a person who's American-born Chinese, where I imagine, and now don't let me speak for you, you have a foot in two different worlds. There's your whole life that's in America, and then there's the whole culture that's passed down from your parents. And from having done this a couple of years with students from Asian ethnic backgrounds, I've learned that many American-born Chinese don't know Chinese nearly as well, the same way that my mom doesn't know Yiddish nearly as well as her parents did. Because once you get to America, you sort of don't necessarily take the old languages seriously, or Chinese school is incredibly difficult. I know that Chinese is an incredibly difficult language to learn. All of this is a very roundabout way of saying, think about what your reader's expectations will be and play with them. See how you match them, see how you break them. But when I hear you talking about your subpar Chinese, I'm like, why do you have subpar Chinese? Did you spend years in Chinese school on the weekends?
I actually did, yeah.
Do your parents cook mapo tofu at home? Or when you decide to go out to dinner, do you go out to Chinese or do you go out to burgers?
Usually it's not Chinese food.
What was that?
Usually it's not Chinese food.
In my family, it usually is. We rarely go out for Jewish food, but we always go out for Chinese. So I sort of assumed that might be the case based on the way that at the beginning you're talking about your family going to visit Italy. All of those orienting details are really valuable because we don't know your life. And your life is specific, and your life may not fall into, and it sounds like it very much does not fall into the stereotypes of your ethnic background because there isn't one experience, right?
Mm.
So that's a thing you have at your disposal. And not a weapon, but a something that you can wield. This idea of, I showed up in China and I realized just how bad my Chinese had gotten to be because I hadn't been in Chinese school for 5 years. Or that, sure, we have Chinese food at home, but usually it's Americanized. We have, I don't know, egg foo young. And the kind of Szechuan mouth heat is very foreign to me. Even though technically it's my ethnic background. Is that interesting to you? Is that a thing you had thought about?
That's pretty interesting, but I'm just worried of actually touching upon things that people have mentioned before, so that it might be a bit general and over. Yes.
Pardon?
It does seem appealing, but I'm worried overweight in many of the essays that colleges would be reading.
Okay. Here's what I want you to just take away from that idea and that whole discussion. I want you to think about and test against your writing. How is my experience different? And how can I bring them into the story that is my own and only my own? And part of that is engaging with how your family treats ethnic identity and how you do, in light of then what this experience like visiting China was like on your own. It may just be a few details scattered throughout, but it could be quite valuable as orienting stuff toward understanding who you are within this larger world.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah. Like when you get to that paragraph that's about eating mapo tofu and all that, it would be useful for us to know that when your family goes out to eat, you go have Italian.
Mm-hmm.
That's different, right?
Yeah.
It's challenging our dumb white expectations. And that's cool.
Okay.
Okay. Do folks have other thoughts that they want to share with Samantha, or shall we call it a day here on this? That is not a rhetorical question. Can I hear a yes, let's move on from everyone?
Yes.
Okay, I'll assume then we're good to go. Samantha, really great work. You did really awesome. There's a great draft. You have some great ideas jumping around in here. And I think if you think about conflict and that stasis destabilization, what it meant to travel on your own, and giving us as many details of how you overcame that challenge, you'll be doing really good. So, great work. Helen, you said there was something you wanted us to look at, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, so our time is brief. I want to talk a little bit about work for... Our time is brief, so I want to talk about our work for next class, and then we're going to spend some time talking about your piece, Helen. If we go a little bit over time, I just want to tell you all at the half hour, you're welcome to go. I will continue talking to Helen until we're done. But, there it is. Thank you. Thank you for dropping it in the folder. For next week, please take a look at... I'm trying to remember what I put on the syllabus. I'm not remembering what I put on the syllabus. We're just going to put it in front of us. Okay, here we are. Yes. Wonderful. Okay, so for next session, which will be this Thursday, what you all need to do is you need to read the Margaret Atwood piece, The Female Body. It's awesome. It's a really interesting rumination on modern female identity. Beyond that, everyone who is not up for workshop this time, you're up next time. So that's you, Esther, and Helen. And I believe we're going to just have to work something out between our other boys who weren't with us today. But both you, Esther, and Helen, you'll both be up, and we'll work it out with our students who aren't here, Vincent. And, oh gosh, did I forget our 6th student's name? Oh no. I'm having a moment. Justin and Vincent. Sorry. Okay, so mark it down. Be ready to read each other's work. If you weren't up for workshop this week, you're up next week. If Justin and Vincent, you both watch this, I'm going to try and get in contact with you too. But try and bring in workshop for next week and read Margaret Atwood. Okay, let's look at Helen's piece. And again, at 9:30, you all can feel welcome to go. Okay. So that we don't waste time, just read it with me yourselves, and then we'll talk a little bit together. I'm not going to do it out loud because it'll just take too long. Wonderful. Okay. I actually want to ask you, Helen, first. How do you feel having completed this? Where are your thoughts at?
Sorry, could you repeat that again? My internet kind of like wavered.
Yeah. Cool. Where are your thoughts at on this piece? What are you thinking? You said that you got to it a little late.
Well, I feel like it's not very connected. Like it's kind of just like here's a story and here's another story, but I feel it's not really a main thread kind of that connects it, except for them all being something related to me being late in some shape or form. I'm not really sure how I could make it a little bit more, I guess, coherent. And then I also feel that there are a lot of descriptors, but I guess I wrote it with the purpose of it being a little bit more on the humorous side and not really on the side. So, so I was hoping that maybe like I polish it maybe with like a little bit both logically and kind of like sentence a little bit. Not sure.
Cool. I have a couple of immediate thoughts. I think that you are right. That there are a lot of different things going on here, a lot of mini stories, and it's going to be hard to connect them together. I don't know if they'll all make it in later. One of the old adages is better one well-told conflict than three minor ones. So it may be worth focusing really in on this experience of starting Taekwondo surrounded by toddlers, because that's insane. And you've given us the beginning of those details, but like, I don't think you've made that nearly as excruciating for yourself as it should be. Because there's kind of something like really embarrassing where like you're learning Taekwondo at 10 next to these kids who may not even be fully potty trained. That's nuts. And to have the perseverance to stick with that is quite a testament to your character. Okay. I think that, as usual, the beginning of your essay actually, I think, starts a little later. I think that this is probably the beginning. It seems I've always been late for the majority of my life. I think if I were behind the wheel, again, one of those conditionals that's like, I'm not telling you to do this, but it's a way to do this. There are two stories here, two stories that converge. One of them is telling the story of learning Taekwondo from scratch as literally someone who's 3 times the age as the other students in the class. And the other thread of the story is an argument in the defense of lateness. And I want to talk about that for a second philosophically. And I want to bounce down to the bottom of the page because this really is a brainstorm. In the defense of lateness, what are good qualities that come with lateness? We don't usually think about them, but there are some. What does that mean? What are ways in which it's good to be late?
I mean, I guess like sometimes when I start late, especially like on an assignment, it kind of pressures me to do it, and I guess.
Pressures you to catch up?
Yeah.
I can think of one. All of those 3-year-olds in that Taekwondo class, were they there of their own volition?
No, I think their parents just wanted them to like dabble in and see if they liked it. Kind of just seeing if it's like a suitable hobby, I guess. Like kind of see if they have towards it. But at least when I was a teacher, there were like some kids that like didn't really want to be there, and some kids really loved it. So it's like if they wanted to teach themselves, I guess, because
So
once they get, maybe they don't have like, but they have to choose where or they.
but that's the way in which your lateness functioned. The reason why you were there and continued to be there was because it was your determination to choose to be there, right?
Yeah.
What are other reasons why people will be late?
Control. Like for example, today, I ride the cow train and later take a shuttle. And train was late by 7 minutes, and then after that, the bus was also like there wasn't any bus till like later, so I ended up being for 2 minutes, which I kind of couldn't have controlled like that in that kind of situation. I feel like the majority of lateness is something that you can kind of try to turn around if you have enough grit and if you really love what you do, like the thing that you're late for, I guess.
One of the things that I can speak to, because I'm not a perpetually late person, but my mom is. She is so captivated by the task at hand that she completely loses track of time. She's committed to whatever she's doing, so she, without fail, manages to be late to the next thing because she has to finish the previous one. That's a reason why people are sometimes late. A single-minded focus on what they're doing right now with no attention to what comes later.
Yeah, that is something I definitely like.
Is that something that is true for you?
Yeah. I guess I'm a little bit of like a perfectionist, so I try to do things even when I don't want to. Like sometimes, like when I have assignments, I tell myself, okay, I have things to do, so I shouldn't do this perfectly, but I end up doing that perfectly, and that pushes a lot of things back, and then that, I guess, pushes sleep schedule back.
I identify with that. Um, um, what are other things that are good about being late?
Well, in some sense, I guess it does make a person stand out. Whether it's like, for example, if sometimes we have most people they come early or like on time to a class, but sometimes when some student comes in late, everyone's like, oh, look at that person. So it kind of places emphasis on or attention to the person. So the times though it's in a bad negative light. So I wouldn't say that standing out is necessarily good for
Okay. Um, so are there any other things that you can think of that are positive qualities that come with being late? I think sometimes it means you come in with greater knowledge, right?
Yes, that is true.
Yeah. It's a different kind of being late. It's the like club late.
Yeah.
I want to wrap this up by 45. Does this seem like a reasonable avenue to think down? Is this bringing up some ideas for you about how you might coordinate all these things together?
So is it possible to like incorporate these stories, all of these stories together to arguing for lateness? Like, is there any possible way to like commit a string?
I think it's possible. Yeah. I think it will be difficult.
I haven't for you. It's not about how to connect them. It's about like an introduction, like a paragraph or something. I was late whenever we meet up, and it's because her mom always says being late is a disease and it's incurable or something. And I feel like I'm not quite sure if this is going to fit with your tone of your essay, but you could maybe start with that or something. Like, I put that in quotes. Prove like how that influences you and how that's meant to you. I don't know if that's something you want to use, but you could try that.
I think what
Sounds like a
I think the spirit of what Fifi says is absolutely on point. I don't know how big a nod to it you need to make because generally in the culture we believe that lateness is bad, but some sort of suggestion of like the ways in which the world looks down on lateness can help you build up your argument about I'm late and being late is actually a good thing. Or else, here are the ways in which being late in my life has been profound.
Yeah. Mhm.
If you were to argue with someone who is saying it's best to be early, how would you argue that it's better to be late?
Um, well, it does like sometimes like when you start early, like doesn't necessarily get you very far. Like sometimes when you start something as a kid, young kid, and a lot of the time can't really focus, so they end up giving up something, and they kind of like a lot of the times they don't realize value in something or kind of take some things for granted. And so if you're older or you start late, you can see, oh, this is something that's really cool or interesting that sometimes like little kids would just think, oh, this is boring, this is lame, and just right away, I guess. So that could be something, but it depends on the child.
Yeah. I think that you have a lot to work with here, and it's a really funny concept and a surprising one, right? Not something that I've ever heard before. It's fun. I should say, I like the story about you and your brother with the 50 State song. I just think it shares the same problem from elsewhere, where we don't yet know how we're supposed to be reading it at the beginning, and we want to know as soon as possible. Does that make sense?
So like, it's like a good starter, I guess. Should I add second paragraph instead?
I think it could be. I think the thing you should think about is, what is the thing you're trying to argue for, and how are you going to bring the various threads of the story together? And maybe that stays an opening paragraph, maybe that becomes a second paragraph, maybe it doesn't appear. But the most important thing is, at this point, figuring out the structure of the argument oriented with a story or the stories. And to me, and again, this is me speaking purely opinionatedly, not I mean, it's for you to decide. What I would try and do is the story of becoming good at Taekwondo surrounded by children, and this idea of being late all your life, but why it's actually good to be late, and allow for those two threads to come together.
I'm a little bit wary of like on one story too much, is I think coming off as too arrogant, like, oh, I accomplished this, or I'm just scared that it becomes something like that, and something that just says, okay, late. I don't know.
I wouldn't be too worried about that, because the thing about that braggy kind of essay is it doesn't start with saying, I was learning from scratch surrounded by 3-year-olds. To me, that's an example of what we've been talking about before. Like, I'm a terrible baseball player, so I've learned to be a great umpire. If you frame it within, here's the downside, you can end up talking about your successes in a way that don't sound arrogant. It can be like, yeah, I started surrounded by the 4-year-olds, but now I'm as good as the kids my age, if not better. It just took me a while to get there. I got there late.
Yeah.
I want to wrap it there for a day. Do you feel reasonably comfortable moving forward, putting something together?
Yes.
Good. Thank you all so much for all of your great contributions, and let's call it a night. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
If any of you have any lingering questions, please ask. I can stick around for just a moment if you have any.
Bye.
Bye, Esther.